Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. A young father and mother are found dead in a car at a cottage in Castle Rock, Wisconsin. The man is sitting in the driver's seat and the woman is found in the trunk. Officials arrive and quickly determine that Leslie Howell and Trevor Buchanan have succumbed to carbon monoxide fumes that have been funneled into the car through a vacuum hose, apparently all set up by the deceased pair themselves. Combined, the two young parents had a total of 6 children. 4 were Leslie's and 2 were Trevor's. But the couple was not married. They were not even dating. They had been thrust together by deadly circumstances that neither of them ever saw coming. And with their deaths, the oddly connected couple took secrets with them that would remain unknown for decades to come. Colin Howell was born in 1959 and grew up amid intense political and religious conflict in Belfast, Ireland. The city was deeply divided between Catholic nationalists and Protestant loyalists. Despite the unrest, or perhaps as a result of it, many of the Irish turned to their religious communities for comfort and security. Colin's parents were no exception. They were evangelical Baptists who aimed to instill the importance of faith in their son. Growing up, Colin attended 3 church services every Sunday and was an active member of a Christian youth organization called the Boys Brigade. As a teenager, he aspired to become a missionary and sought the respect of his fellow churchgoers. However, his deep commitment to his beliefs often set him apart from his peers, leading him to become a loner. While his friends frequented clubs and pubs, Colin stayed home, perceiving such places as sinful. Yet despite his outward godliness, Colin struggled with inner conflicts. And as he grew older, the conflicts became more pronounced. In 1978, at the age of 19, he began buying pornographic magazines, quickly developing an obsession. It's suspected that his inner turmoil and guilt led him to abandon his aspirations of becoming a missionary. By the time he finished secondary school, Colin had decided to pursue a career in medicine, aiming to help people in a different capacity. But he was not academically strong enough to get into medical school, so he opted for dentistry as a more attainable goal. Colin enrolled in a dentistry program at Queen's University in Belfast, where he studied for 6 years. Throughout his time in college, he continued to attend church regularly. In 1980, he caught the eye of a fellow parishioner named Leslie Clark. Born in Plymouth in March 1960, Leslie had 1 brother, and both of them pursued careers in the health sector, with Chris studying anesthesiology and Leslie becoming a nurse. It was during her nursing studies that she met Colin, who was placed at a nearby hospital. The couple was attracted to each other, a case of opposites attract. While Colin was quiet and reserved, Leslie was outgoing and sociable. The two quickly fell for each other and began dating. In 1982, a few years into their relationship, things took an unexpected turn when Leslie became pregnant. The news sent the virtuous Colin into a spiral. An unplanned pregnancy out of wedlock was a significant and public sin, unlike his previous addiction to pornographic magazines, which he could hide. Dealing with this situation would require an act even more taboo than premarital sex, abortion. Faced with the dilemma of abiding by his beliefs and keeping the baby or preserving his godly image and secretly terminating the pregnancy, Colin chose to preserve his image. Although Leslie was hesitant about having an abortion, she feared that Colin would leave her if she didn't do it. So the couple traveled to London, where abortions were legal, to terminate the pregnancy. Then, despite the moral, emotional, and logistical toll that the termination took on the couple, just a few months after they returned, Leslie was pregnant again, landing them in the exact same situation they were just in. With the devout Christian not wanting to admit he was having sex before marriage, Colin pressured Leslie into having another abortion. They returned to London to repeat the procedure. Then, just a few weeks after returning from the second termination, Leslie was pregnant again, back to London for her 3rd pregnancy termination in a matter of months. After Colin graduated from dental school, he and Leslie got married and relocated to Coleraine, a charming village on Northern Ireland's northern coast. Colin secured employment at a local dental practice, while Leslie continued her nursing career. Initially, their life seemed perfect, with stable jobs and a comfortable lifestyle. In October 1984, Leslie gave birth to their first child, Matthew. The period marked a significant shift in their lives. Colin's flourishing dental career allowed Leslie to leave her nursing job and focus on raising their child. The Howells were active members of their local Baptist church, where Colin took on leadership roles, including heading the youth fellowship and volunteering with children's groups. These roles satisfied his desire for religious authority and community respect. But the dynamics at home were less harmonious. Leslie struggled with her new role as a stay-at-home mother, longing to return to her nursing career. Colin, however, expected her to adhere to traditional homemaker responsibilities. The tension was compounded with the birth of their second child, Lauren, in November of 1986, further increasing the demands on Leslie. The following year, Colin decided to advance his career by purchasing office space and opening his own dental practice. While the venture underscored his professional success, it did little to alleviate the unhappiness in his marriage. Colin hired a dentist, and his clientele quickly grew. The practice's success prompted Colin to stretch his finances to the limit by purchasing a large house in 1989. That was the same year they welcomed their third child, Daniel. The large house reinforced Colin's image as a family man within their church community. But despite the outward appearance the house reflected, reality was the opposite. While the house was indeed spacious, and Colin's dental practice was thriving, the financial strain that the large mortgage and 3 kids placed on the family resulted in the home being incomplete and lacking basic amenities like carpeting. And it seemed to be in a constant state of renovation. Leslie began to feel overwhelmed by the mounting responsibilities and the financial burden imposed by Colin's decisions. She started fantasizing about escaping the situation and reportedly began saving money in case she ever decided to leave her husband. And her desire to leave became stronger than ever when she found out that Colin was having an affair with a former classmate from the university. While Colin was well aware that his infidelity violated one of the 10 Commandments, he rationalized that it was preferable to a divorce, just as he had once chosen abortion over the public shame of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. When Leslie discovered the affair, she confronted both Colin and his mistress, and they supposedly stopped seeing each other. But Leslie had had enough and was ready to end it. However, before she managed to leave the relationship, she became pregnant with their 4th child. The new pregnancy intensified their marital conflicts, and Colin soon found yet another woman to fill his needs. It was this new relationship that would shape the future for everyone involved. Enter Hazel Buchanan. Hazel was a friendly, attractive, married nursery school assistant. Her husband, Trevor Buchanan, was a police officer. The couple had 2 children and attended the same church as the Howells. Hazel had started working as a nursery school assistant to escape the monogamy of her life at home, one where her husband would often work long hours, leaving Hazel feeling neglected and isolated. It was while Colin was taking his 3-year-old daughter to a playgroup that he met Hazel. Colin and Hazel would attend regular swimming lessons organized by the church. Hazel's interactions with Colin became the highlight of her day. During one of the lessons, Colin apologized to Hazel for not having innocent thoughts about her. Hazel replied, "Well, I'm not that innocent myself." Colin went to her house later to teach her how to play the guitar, and he said she answered the door in a short denim skirt and sleeveless low-cut blouse. He said, "I knew I wasn't there for guitar lessons." The two started an affair that took place not just in their homes, but in Colin's dentist's chair and at secluded spots like Castle Row Forest Park. Then, in August of 1990, Hazel discovered that she was pregnant. Uncertain whether the father was Colin or her husband, she turned to Colin for a solution. His suggestion? A trip to London for a procedure that he was more than familiar with. As Colin continued his affair with Hazel, Leslie grew increasingly suspicious and confided her concerns to their pastor. The pastor had already been suspicious since a church elder had previously reported seeing Colin and Hazel together at Castle Row Forest Park. When the pastor confirmed it Colin, he denied the accusations, claiming to be a good Christian who would never cheat on his spouse. Unconvinced, the pastor visited Hazel's home, and she promptly confessed to the affair. The pastor advised the couple to be truthful to everyone involved, including both Leslie and Trevor. They did. Each of them informed their respective spouses of the affair, but minimized the extent of it, claiming that it was purely emotional and not physical. Colin was stripped of his church volunteer roles, and the couples began receiving counseling through the church, along with strict guidelines they were required to follow. Trevor was devastated, but was eager to move past the affair and repair his marriage. However, Leslie, who had just had her child, struggled to forgive, with this being the second time she had learned of her husband having an affair. She withdrew into a deep depression. She began taking antidepressants and drinking more heavily, a practice that she had begun to a lesser extent after she found out about Colin's first affair. A few weeks later, Colin revealed to Leslie that his affair with Hazel had indeed been sexual. The revelation was the final straw for Leslie. In a fit of rage, she attacked Colin before locking herself in the bathroom. She then ingested a large quantity of acetaminophen, attempting to overdose, then drove off, leaving a note behind that would eventually play a pivotal role in Colin's future plans. Colin called for help, and Leslie was found unharmed. She spent 3 days in the hospital recovering. After that, both Colin and Leslie appeared to genuinely try to repair their marriage, but that only lasted a few months before, unsurprisingly, Colin returned seeing Hazel. It was around that time in late April of 1991 that Leslie's father moved into the couple's home to help Leslie care for the children. Not long after he moved in, Leslie and Colin returned home from an evening at the theater to find her father, who had been suffering from flu-like symptoms, collapse on the kitchen floor. Emergency responders arrived, but it was too late. Examinations revealed that he had died from a heart attack. Leslie was shattered. The tragedy further reduced her support system and led her to increasingly rely on alcohol to cope. By that point, the couple's marriage was on the brink of collapse, but fearing the public stigma of a divorce, they continued to stay married. That was until Colin came up with a plan. Much like his earlier decisions to conceal premarital pregnancies with secret abortions, he sought another way out. On May 19, 1991, at around 8:30 a.m., a church elder received a phone call from Colin Howell. Colin informed him that Leslie had not been home since last night and that her car was gone. The elder rushed to the Howells' home. Colin told him that he thought Leslie might have gone off with Trevor Buchanan and asked for help in finding them. He suggested that they might be at some cottages called the 12 Apostles. The elder drove to the cottage Colin specified, but didn't see Leslie or Trevor. He returned to the Howells' home and relayed his findings, noting though that he had not checked the garage. So Colin called another church elder asking again to check the cottage. The elder drove to the location and didn't see anyone inside the house, but noticed a car in the garage with its driver's door open. But before he could investigate, he was distracted by what he thought was movement in an upstairs window. Suspecting that it was Trevor and Leslie, he called up to them, didn't receive a response, then returned back to the house to tell Colin. Then, a few hours later, Colin asked the first elder to return to the cottage to check again, this time providing him with the keys to the property. The elder decided to take a police officer with him this time. After searching the home again, they checked the garage. There, they discovered the bodies of Trevor and Leslie. They checked for signs of life, but there were none. Authorities were called to the scene. Leslie's car had been reversed into the garage. Trevor's body was in the driver's seat, and Leslie was in the trunk. A vacuum cleaner pipe was found near Leslie's head, loosely connected to the car's exhaust pipe. In the trunk, Leslie had on headphones connected to a Walkman and was surrounded by family photos. A forensic medical officer pronounced both Trevor and Leslie dead at 2:15 p.m., noting that they had likely been dead for at least 12 hours. Forensic examinations determined that both victims died from carbon monoxide poisoning. That finding, along with the accounts from Colin and Hazel, led authorities to conclude that the deceased pair, distraught over their spouse's affair, made it pact to end it all in the garage of that cottage. But had they? There were several indications that something more sinister may have been at play, starting with evidence that was clearly apparent at the scene, like the position of the driver's seat. The driver's seat where Trevor was sitting was positioned far too forward for Trevor's legs to fit properly. He would not have driven the car in such a cramped position. So, whoever actually drove the car to its destination was likely much shorter than Trevor. Colin Howell was significantly shorter than Trevor. Trevor's legs were so ill-fitting that one of his feet was actually dangling outside of the open car door, which led to another clue. Despite a hose being rigged to pump the deadly fumes into the car, Trevor's foot dangling out of the door meant that the car door was left open, and even the car window was left open as well. An ineffective way to trap fumes in the car. And although the scene was intended to look as though the couple had made a pact to end everything together, why were they separated? It seemed highly unusual that such a pact would result in them being in separate parts of the car. The more likely scenario would have been for them to both be in the front seats side by side. Also suspicious was that Leslie's shoes were only partially on her feet, which would have been a highly unlikely way for her to enter the trunk herself. And then there were the injuries. Photographs of Trevor post-mortem showed that he sustained injuries to his mouth and his nose, and there was blood coming from the back of his head. Colin explained that Trevor had been involved in a minor skirmish earlier, which authorities accepted. Blood was even found on Trevor's sweatshirt, but it was never examined to see who it belonged to. Additionally, Colin himself had a cut on his forehead. He told the authorities that he had bumped his head. And remember how Colin insisted that the elders check the cottage. Despite his 3 separate attempts to direct elders to the place where victims would eventually be found, authorities failed to ask him why he was so insistent or how he knew. And then there was the issue of Colin and Hazel's credibility. Despite authorities knowing that both Colin and Hazel had lied to them about certain aspects of their affair, they still considered them credible witnesses and relied on their statements about what happened. There was also relevant information that authorities dismissed. They remained aware that Colin may have attempted to murder Leslie on a previous occasion. Friends of Leslie's reported that he had recently dropped an electric cable into her bath water while she was in it. And of course, there was money. Colin was in dire financial straits, but investigators did not look into the possibility of a financial motive for the deaths, including the existence of life insurance policies on both of the victims. But all of these eye-raising clues were not lost on everyone. At least 2 people expressed concerns to authorities about Trevor's injuries, and even one of the police officers shared his suspicion that Colin may be involved. But none of it was enough to combat the word of the charming, respected local dentist with his strong Christian ties and reputation. In addition to all of the clues that were ignored, the investigation suffered several other procedural lapses. There was no scene log and no sketches or measurements were taken. The deaths were ruled as self-inflicted, the case was closed, and paperwork was filed and subsequently lost. They had done it. Colin Howell and Hazel Buchanan had gotten away with murdering their spouses. Once Colin had come to the conclusion that his marriage was over, he devised a plan. One that would rid him of the spouses that were standing in the way of his romance, as well as net him the cash he needed to get out of debt. Ever since he had discovered the note Leslie left behind following her ingestion of the pills, he envisioned how he could incorporate it into his grand plan. He finally shared that grand plan with Hazel in the middle of 1991, explaining that the future of their relationship depended on them ending their marriages, but not through divorce. Hazel agreed. Then, on the night of May 18th, the day of his youngest son's 2nd birthday, Colin set his plan into motion. He wedged a hockey stick underneath his children's bedroom door to prevent them from leaving their rooms. Then he waited until Leslie fell asleep in the lounge of their home, which was where she normally slept given the collapse of their marriage. Earlier that day, Colin had cut off the ends of a baby bottle and used the remaining portion to connect a hose to their car's exhaust pipe. Once Leslie was asleep, he retrieved the connected hose from the garage, let it into the lounge, started the car engine, and left the room. But then, concerned that the fumes were not filling the room quickly enough, he came back into the room and tucked the hose under his wife's blanket close to her face. As the fumes began to take effect, Leslie stirred and started to wake up, calling out the name of their eldest son, Matthew. Colin acted swiftly. Holding her down, he pulled the blanket over her head and held it there, making sure she had no opportunity to escape the lethal gas. After Leslie stopped moving and Colin was certain she was dead, he turned off the car engine. He then placed her body in the trunk of their car and called Hazel and said, "I'm finished with Leslie. Is everything ready?" Colin then drove through the darkness to Hazel's house. Prior to that night, Ian provided Hazel the sedative to give to Trevor before he arrived. She did. She had crushed the pills and mixed them into a tuna sandwich for him. He quickly became drowsy and went to bed after eating it. She then made sure that their children were asleep and let Colin know that Trevor was sedated. Colin arrived at their home and backed the car into the garage. He proceeded to Hazel's bedroom, where Trevor was in a deep sleep. Like he had just done at his own home, he took a prepared hose from the garage, ran it through and positioned it near Trevor's mouth. Confident in his ability to overpower the heavily sedated Trevor, Colin did not restrain him. He started the car, allowing the carbon monoxide to flow through the hose and into Trevor's wounds. But like Leslie, Trevor began to stir, prompting Colin to jump on him and hold the hose in place. Despite the sedative and the carbon monoxide exposure, the seasoned police officer fought the struggle intensified, with both men wrestling on the floor, the hose spewing toxic fumes into the room. Colin, momentarily dizzy from inhaling the fumes himself, managed to regain control. He forced the hose back into Trevor's mouth, pulling a blanket over his head and pinning his arms down as he watched Trevor succumb to the gas and die. Hazel stood on the other side of the closed bedroom door during the entire ordeal, according to her, covering her ears. After ensuring Trevor was dead, Colin changed Trevor out of his pajamas and into the clothes Hazel had laid out. Then he placed him in the car next to Leslie's body. Hazel's next role was to clean up the evidence. She cut the hose into sections and burned them in the fireplace. Colin didn't come away from the attack unscathed. Even though he didn't inhale a fatal dose of the carbon monoxide, he did have some of the nausea and dizziness that exposure can cause. He stumbled outside for fresh air, but couldn't afford to rest. He still had a lot of work to do. He was no stranger to concealing his wrongdoings, but he needed this cover-up to be perfect. He was responsible for handling the bodies, and Hazel was responsible for taking care of the scene, including burning the hose in the fireplace, cleaning the floor, and washing the bed linen. Colin had worn surgical gloves, but he knew how trace evidence could be left behind, so he insisted on a thorough cleaning. He drove the bodies to the empty cottage that had belonged to Leslie's recently deceased father. There, he arranged Trevor's body in the driver's seat, and Leslie's in the trunk, positioning her with headphones on and family photos beside her to make it appear as though she had died peacefully, listening to music. He also left the old note that Leslie had written back at their home, confident that he could use it later to support his cover-up. He then connected a vacuum cleaner hose to the car's exhaust, and ran it into the vehicle, turned on the engine, closed the garage, and left the scene, hoping that it would look like the two distraught spouses had made a pact to end it all together. Then, he retrieved a bike that he had previously hidden nearby and rode it home. Given the official ruling on Trevor and Leslie's deaths, their surviving spouses were ready to collect. Between Leslie's life insurance, will, and an endowment from her father's estate, Colin collected a total of about £414,000, equivalent to about $575,000, more than enough to solve his financial problems. Hazel received £130, or about $180,000 from insurance, as well as subsequent payouts from her husband's police pension. After their spouses' deaths, the surviving murderers took about a 6-week break from their relationship, then secretly resumed it. But it wasn't the same. Hazel was racked with guilt, to the point of struggling to be intimate with Colin. But once again, Colin comes through with a solution. Unwilling to let their romance cool off after everything he had done to be with her, Colin suggested using nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas, to help Hazel relax. While nitrous oxide is intended to be inhaled in dental and medical settings to relax patients, Colin used it to allow him to be intimate with Hazel without any inhibitions. And he didn't stop there. Recognizing Hazel's growing discomfort, he introduced a more powerful sedative, often used before surgeries. Under that sedative, Hazel would have been incapacitated, classifying Colin's actions toward her during that state as assault. The couple's relationship deteriorated to the point where Hazel began refusing to engage with Colin while she contemplated her next steps. So, it was time for Answer Man Colin to put his thinking cap on again. The solution this time, patience. He decided to assault his patients. Since the sedatives were so effective on Hazel, why not use them to assault his patients, of which he had a plentiful supply? He began administering the powerful pre-surgery sedative to female patients before dental procedures, then groping them while they were sedated and defenseless. Many of his victims were unaware that they had been assaulted due to the memory loss caused by the sedative. But some of them were aware, and they spoke out. At least 6 women came forward with allegations against Colin, highlighting his pattern of abuse. Then, in 1996, 5 years after their spouses' deaths and fully out in the open with their relationship, Hazel ended their relationship. The two parted ways and moved on. Hazel went on to meet and marry another police officer, David Stewart, in 2005. They lived in a luxury home outside of Coleraine, where she was a regular in the police community's social scene. It was common to see shots of her in glamorous ball gowns captured by the local press at charity dinners, and Colin moved on as well. Within a year of his breakup with Hazel, the 37-year-old dentist and father of 4 married his second wife, Kyle Jorgensen, just 5 months after meeting her at a Bible study class. She was a 30-year-old former waitress and divorced mother of 2, who had recently moved from America to Ireland after a violent 3-year marriage to her first husband. The couple merged families, and within the year, Kyle was pregnant with her first son, Eric. Then, when Eric was just a few months old, Colin decided that it was time to tell Kyle about his past. As she was feeding her new baby in the kitchen, he confessed to murdering his first wife and his lover's husband. He also divulged that he was currently having another affair. Kyle was initially horrified and urged Colin to turn himself in for the murders, which he considered. But after talking it through, they decided that for their 7 children, it would be best to keep the family together. They agreed to stay quiet, but Colin's revelation still didn't sit well with Kyle. She asked a church friend what she should do if her husband had done something, not fully disclosing what that something was. The man dismissed her concern and replied, "I don't want to hear it. It's before the cross. You shouldn't tell on other people before that time in their life," referring to the teaching that the sins you've committed before finding God are forgiven. Meanwhile, despite Colin claiming that the affair he confessed to was over, he continued to lead a double life behind Kyle's back. Amidst it all, his dental practice and reputation continued to thrive. He expanded into cosmetic dentistry and implants, both highly lucrative fields, with the public unaware of the good dentist's past and current evil acts. Over the next few years, Colin and Kyle had 4 more children together, bringing Colin's total to 9 and 11 between them. Colin's recent professional success enabled him to buy a property in Florida. He was even able to invest nearly £400,000 in a buried treasure investment where gold was reported to be buried in Philippine caves by Japanese troops in the 1940s. The investment was so promising that Colin began fraudulently swindling money through his practice, claiming to perform procedures he didn't actually perform. He even sold his share in his 2 dental practices to add to his investment. It seemed that all his wrongdoings of the past were behind him, but not forever. In April of 2007, Colin received devastating news about his eldest son, 22-year-old Matthew. Matthew, who was studying for a semester in St. Petersburg, Russia, was calling out to a friend over the railing of his apartment building, and losing his grip, he tragically fell 4 stories onto the concrete below, killing him. Colin was stricken with grief. Shortly after that, he learned that the large buried treasure investment that he had poured all of his and others' money into was a scam. In a desperate attempt to try to salvage some of his investment, he traveled to the Philippines, but all he received was a box containing 2 gold bars worth about £30. He returned to Northern Ireland and explained to Kyle that he had lost £350,000 in a failed scheme, which included savings for their children's education. And for good measure, he threw in the admission that following Matthew's death, he had renewed his old affair. And, since he was sharing, he included that he was assaulting women while they were sedated at his clinic. The affair admission would be Colin's 3rd strike, counting his 2nd affair that he had fessed up to back in 2003. Outraged, Kyle kicked the murderous serial adulterer out of the house. Penniless and humiliated, Colin continued working as a dentist, but having lost nearly everything, he began to believe that God was punishing him for his past sins. He was convinced that his misfortune would continue until he made things right. And so did Kyle. In January 2009, a month after kicking him out and 10 years after he told her about his murders, Kyle called the church elders to her home to meet with Colin. Kyle begged Colin to confess, telling him, "The truth will set you free." He confessed the killings to the elders, admitting both he and Hazel's involvement. Stunned to learn that Colin was not the upstanding citizen and devout Christian that they believed he was, the elders convinced him to turn himself in, which he did. Shortly afterward, Hazel was also taken into custody. After having gotten away with murder for nearly 2 decades, the truth finally caught up to them. Despite Colin's confession, he pleaded not guilty to the charges, and so did Hazel. Before Colin's trial begins, Kyle filed for divorce and returned to her native America with her 7 children. Having known about the murders for a decade and not reported it, it was unclear whether she would be charged or called for questioning again. Then, just days before Colin's trial was set to begin in 2010, in a surprise move, he changed his plea to guilty for the 2 murders. Later that year, he also pleaded guilty to indecently assaulting 3 women patients. He was facing 14 other assault-related charges reported to have taken place over a span of 10 years, but he denied those. On December 3, 2010, Colin Howell was sentenced to life in prison for the murders with a minimum of 21 years. A few months later, he received an additional 5.5 years for the sexual assaults to be served concurrently with his life sentence. He did not face trial for the reported rape of Hazel. In 2011, Hazel, now going by her married name of Hazel Stewart, stood trial for 2 counts of murder. Present on one side of the courtroom were the children of death. Hazel's children also attended. Despite losing their father, they chose to stand by their mother. Throughout the trial, Hazel claimed that she was manipulated by Colin and that he was the principal architect of the murders. She claimed that she was not an active participant, but rather a passive victim. However, the prosecution laid out a detailed account of the events leading up to and following the murders. They showed how Hazel was not a bystander, an active conspirator, outlining how she provided Trevor with a sedative-laced sandwich, guided Colin to the bedroom where Trevor slept, and disposed of the evidence. Most of the details were provided by testimony from Colin himself, who would in turn state witness against his former partner in crime, providing detailed evidence against her. His 4 days of testimony were devastating to her defense. He described that while she may not have understood the plan as thoroughly as he did, she never asked him to stop. He said she initially didn't think they could pull it off, but eventually she fully cooperated. He said that her concern was not about the concept, but about being caught. During his testimony, he also admitted that he may have indeed flicked his wife with a live cable while she was in the bathtub prior to the final murder. He said, "I saw the opportunity to shift the balance of power in our relationship." During his court-ordered psychological exams, Colin noted how his affair is what triggered Leslie to start drinking. He said, "Before the affair, she wasn't like that. She just couldn't cope with the pain I had caused with the affair." The jury also heard some of the 15 taped interviews that Hazel had with investigators when she was first arrested. In them, she outlines her specific roles in the crime, but still claims she was coerced. She described, "Maybe I was easy prey. He's a very calculating person, a very clever guy. I'm not very bright, unfortunately, but he was a step ahead of me the whole time. I thought, if I say something against this, he'll kill me." Throughout the tapes, she changes her account of the events at least 3 times. She also recounted how Colin would give her laughing gas in his dentist's chair, and how he once gave her too much so that he could test the limits of how much he could give. Colin confirmed that he had indeed drugged Hazel in an experiment to test the doses that he would later use on their murder victims. Then he had sex with her while she was unconscious. In March 2011, the jury took just over 2 hours to find 48-year-old Hazel Stewart guilty of both murders. Following the verdicts, police acknowledged that the initial police investigation was deeply flawed, with key evidence overlooked, crucial witness statements not examined, and more. They issued a formal apology to the families of the victims, noting that they regretted the delayed justice and prolonged suffering that their failings caused. Police also conducted a review of their procedures to ensure that sudden deaths undergo a thorough investigation in the future. In light of the true nature of Leslie and Trevor's deaths, the death of Leslie's father, which occurred just 12 days before Leslie and Trevor's murders, was called into question. Colin had used Leslie's father's death as a key point in the cover-up of the murders, stating that Leslie was distraught over his death, so it was reasonable to speculate whether her father's death was also orchestrated by Colin as the initial step of his bigger plan. Colin denied killing Leslie's father, and since the body was cremated, something that Colin insisted that Leslie wanted for her father, there was no way of exhuming it to gather enough evidence to charge Colin. Leslie's brother speculated that Colin may have found out about 212 pounds in Leslie's bank account and hatched the murder plan to get his hands on it. Leslie's relatives believed that her father may have secretly given her those funds to help her escape Colin in the months before she was killed. Leslie had told a friend that she wanted to make sure her husband did not get any money that her father left her, stating that that money is for her and the kids, not for him. For 4 years, Cal remained under investigation for not reporting the murders during the 10 years that she was aware of them, but she was never charged. Authorities maintained that there wasn't sufficient evidence to provide a reasonable prospect of conviction. Colin Howell is currently serving a life sentence in HMP Maghabury, a high-security prison in Northern Ireland. Now 64 years old, his involvement in religious activities and knowledge of the Bible has gained him trust and respect among the population. Described as a model prisoner by prison staff, they say that he is consistently polite and mannerly, and always refers to officers as sir. They did, however, note that he likes to think he's not one of the regular criminals. They reported how he applied to be the jail's dentist for all the prisoners, but since he's a convicted murderer and no longer has a license to practice, he was turned down. They said he was furious. They noted that while the prison does have a lot of inmates with dental problems, Colin Howell was not the answer. One prison worker noted how Colin suffered a few spankings when he was returned to the general population after temporarily being moved away for his own safety. Colin was also reported to have gotten into an altercation with one of his inmate friends. Both Colin and the other inmate, who was serving a 22-year sentence for rape and murder, were both known for spreading the gospel to other inmates. They were getting along just fine until they fell out after Colin accused the other inmate of scratching his R. Kelly CD. Colin Howell will be eligible for parole no earlier than the year 2030, at which time he will be 72 years old. Hazel Stewart's life in prison has been less publicized, but she continues to serve her time in Highbank Prison in Belfast. In 2013, she appealed her conviction for the murder of Leslie Howell, but it was dismissed. She also tried to appeal the conviction of the murder of her husband, but upon the advice of her counsel that the appeal was groundless, she dropped it. In 2021, her lawyers were planning to challenge the decision to not prosecute Colin Howell for raping her. If they do end up challenging that decision, and if she were to win, they may appeal her conviction again, arguing that because she was raped, she was not in a fit state of mind to know what she was doing when she participated in the murders. Barring any such successful appeal, she will be eligible for parole no sooner than 2029. This widely publicized case from Northern Ireland was the subject of a book titled Let This Be Our Secret, written by Belfast journalist Derek Henderson. It was later adapted into a Northern Irish television miniseries called The Secret, which aired first on ITV, then on Netflix in 2016. It was a mini-series that Colin was able to watch from his prison cell. According to prison officials, once he completed his chores, drank his tea, and said his prayers, the 57-year-old settled in to watch the show on the 16-inch color TV in his cell. His lawyer disputed that claim and said Colin had not watched the series, but prison insiders insisted that he reveled in the production, feeling that the story moved him up the notoriety chain in jail. They said that he tries to come off as modest, but they know exactly what he's like. And that's it for this case. What are your thoughts about Colin Howell? Always ready with solutions that had no limits, and both Hazel and Kyle, who were somehow able to sleep next to Colin every night and not wonder whether they might someday meet the same fate should they ever become Colin's inconvenience. Let us know your thoughts in the comments about this clumsy and arrogant murder that somehow still resulted in the killers getting away with it for nearly 20 years. Case 2. Carol and Stephen Baxter were a loving couple living out their golden years in the seaside village of West Mersey, a town in Essex, England. The couple married in 2000 and had 2 children together, Elena or Ellie and Harry. Carol also had 2 other children from 2 previous marriages. In 2012, the couple came up with an innovative idea, one that they saw a clear need for, but no one fulfilling it. With the ever-growing popularity of standing quadrant showers, they found that no one was making bath mats to suit them. Carol wrote on her LinkedIn page, "You probably purchased a mat to step out onto that isn't quite right. Your mat is either rectangular, square, or even circular, and you just wish somebody had thought of designing one, especially for you and your curved shower." That is where Casplash came in. Carol and Stephen founded the company, which sold curved bath mats that fit snugly around modern corner or curved showers, along with matching towels. Carol was the managing director, and Stephen, who designed the rugs, was a fellow director of the company. Stephen was also a top executive at Jones Lang LaSalle, a multi-billion-pound global real estate firm founded in the UK with offices in 80 countries. He was the global lead of operational risk and assurance. In 2015, 3 years into the business, the couple was working hard to promote Casplash and found itself in need of some technical expertise. Through a mutual friend of Carol's, the couple was introduced to an IT consultant named Luke DeWitt. Luke was a slightly weird and nerdy, but friendly young man. He created a website for Casplash and would continue consulting for the business on and off for the next 10 years. During that time, in 2021, Luke's father died. The Baxters had sympathy for the young man and began to take the visibly lonely Luke into their home more often, even inviting him to their family's birthday meals. He was especially close to Carol, who he would accompany on walks and to the gym. They all became very close to the point where Luke described himself as the couple's adopted son. The couple was thriving, and by 2023, 64-year-old Carol and 61-year-old Stephen were self-made millionaires. They began planning how they would spend their golden years together, taking early retirement and downsizing from their 5-bedroom, million-pound home to a bungalow. Carol planned to start taking art classes, and Stephen planned to play more golf. But the art classes and golf would never happen. On April 9, 2023, an Easter Sunday, Carol and Stephen's daughter, 22-year-old Ellie Baxter, had not heard from her parents for 2 days and became worried. She went to their home to check on them and noticed that the shades were still closed, unusual for the middle of the day. She knocked, but no one answered. So, she went around the back to see if she could get a look inside. She could. She could see her parents in the conservatory or sunroom, slumped in their armchairs but not moving. Something was definitely wrong. She immediately called Luke, who lived just a few streets down, and he rushed right over. Hearing Ellie shouting, "They're not moving," and hitting the windows, a neighbor came to help and gave her a hammer to break a window and get in. Ellie called 999, the UK's emergency line, and she, her partner, and Luke entered. Ellie had her 1-year-old son with her as well. On the 999 call, Ellie grew increasingly distressed as they entered the house. She tells the handler, "We need an ambulance right now. She's been poisoned, and my mom's not very well. They're poisoned. They're dead. They're frozen. They're so cold." With Ellie becoming overcome by what she's seeing, Luke takes over the call. "I need to come out, guys. It's their daughter, you can hear." "Yeah, it's absolutely fine. I'm going to go and get help for you now. Just get on the phone with me. Just tell me exactly what's happened and let me know, please, just so we can all go to bed safe." Well, we just turned up to the house and they hadn't really heard from anyone for about a day and a half. So we came round and their daughter got here first, and then they got around to the back, saw through their conservatory that they were sitting in their armchairs not moving, and we smashed the window to get in. I'm all ready to help you now. Just stay on the phone. Thank you. Thank you. Anytime we can wrap up soon. I need to go and be with my daughter. I appreciate it. I'm trying to be as quick as I possibly can, just so I can make sure we've got a helpful response. They've been really well, okay? I'll leave you in the first response hands, okay? All the best now. Thank you. Thank you. No worries. Bye. Emergency responders arrived, but it was too late. The Baxters were dead. Everyone was baffled. Both Ellie and the responders immediately suspected carbon monoxide poisoning. But the fire department quickly ruled that out, as well as any other dangerous toxins. With Ellie still understandably grief-stricken and distraught, police speak with Luke to try to get an account of what happened. "Anna, you say you last saw them on Friday. I got home just before 8, so that's when I left. And me and Steve were just talking about work and the business. Carol can't work anymore. Last year, she's not been able to do anything. So we were just having a chat, but he didn't really feel up to it. I was going to come back tomorrow and check on them again. I'm used to checking on them. They're always popping in, because they wanted this weekend. Then Ellie called me this morning, and I was always, well, I think we're both a bit uneasy. As you would be, understandable. Eddie popped by first, saw the blinds were still down, and immediately panicked. I was meeting them anyway, but Marcus called me, just giving me that they're in the chairs that we're going to be able to buy. So I literally ran from home to here to contact Daniel. Okay. And as soon as I got here, they'd just smashed the back window to get in. Okay, fair enough. So you last saw them alive on Friday. And have you seen them today? Did you go in to see them yourself? I've been in there, yeah. And I went upstairs, and the paramedic asked me to get all Carol's medication this year. She's got a low, because sometimes she'll have various things over the years, all the various operations she's had. I don't know if any of it's valid, but I know Carol. That's right. Yeah, they like to know what people take, gives them an idea of what they're suffering from. She's actually taken. There's quite a few she might take. She has every morning levothyroxine. But sometimes she forgets, and she can take it 6 or 7 times. I know that's a real issue. She doesn't know. She doesn't know. She's taken it loads of times. His statement about Carol forgetting whether she has taken her medication, leading to her sometimes taking it 6 or 7 times, was worrisome. At the beginning of July, over 2 months after the couple was found dead, an autopsy was performed. It revealed the couple had been poisoned. Stephen with a lethal dose of fentanyl, and Carol with lethal doses of fentanyl and promethazine. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid similar to morphine, except that it's up to 100 times more potent. In the UK, fentanyl is not part of a nationwide opioid epidemic like it is here in the US. In the UK, a prescription for fentanyl can only be obtained in very serious cases where it is warranted. In addition to the autopsy results, authorities also learned that a year prior to the couple's deaths, multiple tacks were found in Carol's digestive tract after being admitted to the hospital for severe abdominal pain. Based on that finding, along with the autopsy results, a murder investigation is launched. Police arrested the 3 people who were closest to the crime: Ellie, her partner, and Luke. Police said that the arrests were to gain comprehensive accounts from them, and that they continue to remain open-minded as to how the couple died. Meanwhile, they continue investigating. They learn more about Carol and the reason she was taking all those medications Luke alluded to. She had been extremely sick for over 18 months leading up to her death. She suffered from Hashimoto's disease, an autoimmune condition that causes fatigue, difficulty thinking, and more. The illness was debilitating and sometimes mysterious. She was on numerous medications and health supplements to try to combat her illness and symptoms, but she struggled to cope with them and wasn't getting better. According to Ellie, her dad became lonely as a result, with her mom suffering from dementia-like or stroke-like symptoms, including struggling to eat and to stay awake, and sometimes unable to speak or properly open her eyes. But it wasn't for lack of support. Carol had accumulated a wide support network that was there for her every step of the way. She had her family, of course, her husband and their 4 children. And there was Luke, who, although only officially scheduled to visit for work 3 days a week, was there every day to help with her care. And there were numerous other people who made themselves available as well. Cheryl was a friend and a huge support to Carol, someone she could talk to. The two of them both had the same disease, so they could relate to each other. They regularly messaged back and forth with support, encouragement, and a little tough love. At one point, when Cheryl found out that Carol was washing dishes, she sent her a message, severely reprimanding her, telling her, "You are completely ignoring the rules. I had you down as a smart lady, I really did. Play by the rules and stop trying to do things. You are seriously ill." Then there was Cheryl's sister, Jenny, who was a theater producer. Jenny not only supported Carol, but also supported her daughter, Ellie, who had aspirations of being a singer. She worked on arranging for Ellie to participate in a singing competition in London. Like Cheryl, Jenny became someone that both Carol and now Ellie could trust. Eventually, Carol also began working directly with Cheryl's doctor, Dr. Andrea Bowden, a Florida-based doctor who specialized in their Hashimoto disease. The doctorate was a huge resource for Carol. Dr. Bowden would direct Carol's medical treatment, including taking numerous supplements, which Luke was a master at administering since he was there helping out daily. Carol affectionately referred to him as her mixologist, with him whipping up smoothies that contained the doctor-recommended nutrients. Luke would take videos of Carol to send to Dr. Bowden to document her condition. Sadly, she seemed to be deteriorating rather than improving, and Carol had others in her network of support, including other patients of Dr. Bowden like Linda, who encouraged Carol to do what Andrea says, or you will have other problems. And Marnie Pantry, who told Carol, "I have my life back. Listen to Andrea. Stop fighting it. I do not know what you are going through, only that we are very similar, and you are stuck in the same phase I was 8 months ago. I was ill, and one day I finally listened." With the ease of communicating via messages, all communications took place either via email or WhatsApp. Carol was, however, finally able to connect with Jenny via phone after only messaging for such a long period of time. "Hi, Carol. It's Jenny. It's Cheryl's sister." "Yes. Oh, so nice to finally speak to you after all these messages we've been doing." The network of those women and others helped Cheryl and her family work through Carol's devastating ordeal. With the autopsy results leading to landing the 3 possible suspects in custody, police moved swiftly to identify the culprit or culprits of the couple's poisoning. And it doesn't take them long. They quickly hone in on several findings that begin to make the culprit obvious, starting with the will. Subsequent searches of the Baxter home led to the discovery of both open and unopened fentanyl patches and a will. The 5-part will suspiciously named the Baxters' dear friend Lou DeWitt as the director and person of significant control of Casplash, and explicitly gave him control of making all business-making decisions. It stated that when their daughter Ellie, or Elena, turned 30, the directorship would split 50-50, but that Elena could not remove DeWitt from his directorship. It also stated that a grant of £60,000 should be given to the company out of the couple's estate to be used for new ideas. That will was drastically different than the original will that the couple submitted to their lawyer 2 years prior. The original will stated that the Baxters' money would be left to their 4 children. And according to the attorney who drafted the original, the new will did not read as a legal document, and that there was no logic to how it was laid out. He said that it appears whoever drafted this document has no idea how a business is run. With the discovery of the clearly fake will, police release Ellie and her partner without charge. They zero in on the person who has suddenly shifted to gain from the will, Luke DeWitt. And the more they dig, the more they find. With DeWitt leaving the Baxters' home at 7:55 p.m. on the Good Friday before they were found, that made him the last person to see the couple alive. Based on data from her pacemaker, Carol's time of death was somewhere between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. the following day. That meant that it took a full 15 or more hours for a poisoned Carol to die after DeWitt left the home. Stephen's time of death was not able to be determined. After DeWitt poisoned the couple and they were unconscious, he turned to Carol's iPad, which was open to her banking application, and transferred £6,000 from the couple's bank account to Casplash, the company he had just willed himself access to. When police arrested DeWitt, he had both unopened and opened packs of fentanyl patches right in his backpack. He had access to them since the death of his father, who had a prescription due to the pain he had from cancer, but when asked about them, DeWitt said they belonged to his granddad, who died a few weeks prior, and that he intended to return them to the pharmacy. They also searched his home. DeWitt had grown up in West Mercy, and he and his mother still lived together in the town, just a few streets over from the Baxters. The mother and son shared a bedroom. It contained 2 single beds. Hers had pink bedding, his blue. In their bedroom, police discovered even more fentanyl patches. They also discovered a box. It contained tacks similar to the ones found in Carol's abdomen just over a year prior to the murder. Inside the same box were what was described as a treasure trove of medicine capsules, which DeWitt had opened and emptied out. Authorities speculated that the capsules were the medium DeWitt used to administer the tack to Carol in an attempt to murder her back then. They traced DeWitt's purchase of the tacks to right before doctors found tacks in Carol's abdomen. Authorities wondered how this person was able to pull off deceiving such a smart, savvy couple for such a long period of time. They got their answer when they confiscated DeWitt's devices. They revealed that all of the confidants, all the resources, all the medical advice Carol was getting, was made up, as were the people delivering them. All of them. Lou DeWitt had fabricated them all. From Cheryl, to her sister Jenny, to Dr. Bowden, and 20 other distinct fake personas that would communicate with Carol and sometimes her daughter. They were all contrived by DeWitt. There were supporters, medical professionals, fellow sufferers, and more. Some were intended to discredit Carol's real doctor. Others were created to solicit trust, and others were intended to isolate Carol from her children. As with any effective scam, the web of deception was elaborate and extensive. DeWitt had even created a WhatsApp group of fabricated fellow Hashimoto's sufferers who would exchange ways of combating their disease. With all communications happening through messaging, it was all that the Baxters had to go on. They often attempted to connect in person with the people they grew close to. They would arrange meetings, but they would never happen, including one such arranged meeting that led the couple to drive 3 hours to meet one of the friends. And of course, no one showed. At one point, the facade became too hard to maintain through messages alone. Remember when Ginny finally made her audio debut? I'm sure it surprises exactly no one that the recording was actually DeWitt practicing impersonating one of his made-up female personas. It later wouldn't surprise a jury either, which laughed out loud when the recording was played in court. Investigators would also discover another recording he had made to perfect that persona. And while the impersonations sounded ridiculous, their intent was cold and heartless. The fictitious Florida-based Dr. Bowden recommended remedies like kale and flaxseed smoothies, as well as generally advising Carol on what she could and could not do. One piece of advice was for Carol to distance herself from her family. The fictitious doctor wrote, one of the final personas DeWitt created was a Dr. Alan Mandel. Mandel was the persona who recommended a liver detox drink that authorities believed DeWitt used to administer the final lethal dose of drugs. The treatment was made to sound so beneficial that even Stephen agreed to it, along with Carol. He warned them that the drink would not taste nice. Law enforcement had their man, but who was Luke DeWitt? According to those who knew him, he had no interest in his social life, played a lot of video games, and occasionally attended Comic-Con. After drifting between odd jobs at age 22, DeWitt reportedly started up a website design company with a friend. But according to another friend, it was never a proper company, and all they succeeded in doing was creating a logo. Friends were shocked to hear of his arrests, with one friend incredulously checking to see if there could possibly be another Luke DeWitt, figuring they could not be talking about the mild-mannered person he knew. DeWitt was said to volunteer at a soup kitchen and not have a violent bone in his body. His call-in reserve character was clear, even back during his already incredibly polite arrest. so we can interview about the offense, enable any forensics that we need to be done, interrupt any co-defendants, and prevent any loss of damage or any evidence. So we'll be taking you up to chapter custody, and then there'll be a process from there, mate, right? Have you been arrested before? No. Never been arrested, no. No. The process will be explained throughout, obviously with the limited information we've got at the moment, but anything further will be explained throughout the investigation, alright? But one friend, although in agreement about DeWitt's nonviolent demeanor, speculated his motivation may be rooted in his desire to get back at everyone who had written him off, perhaps striving to commit the perfect crime. The friend commented that DeWitt thought he was cleverer than most people, and was sometimes frustrated that friends had moved on to better things. But while his nonviolent demeanor and unassuming character may have deceived everyone, it made no difference to the circumstance he currently faced. It was clear that over a period of at least 18 months, Luke DeWitt had systematically poisoned and brainwashed Carol Baxter, then viciously murdered her and her husband. And while Carol was indeed diagnosed with Hashimoto disease by her actual doctor, she was being properly treated for her condition. But once DeWitt became involved, he and his fake personas persuaded her to ignore her real doctor's advice, and her health began to decline. The personas convinced her that her poor health was caused by the disease and recommended various useless treatments. In reality, her debilitating symptoms were not due to her Hashimoto's, but were in fact due to her long-term exposure to the drug promethazine, which she was encouraged was good for her by the personas. It was determined to be one of the cruelest ways to poison someone, producing symptoms like dementia, Parkinson's, and possibly a stroke. As the investigation continued, authorities learned of the extensive lengths DeWitt had gone to pull off his devastating charade. Although DeWitt claimed to have a master's degree in computer science from the University of East Anglia, according to the university, they had no record of him having ever attended. And in order to gain sympathy, DeWitt had lied to the Baxter family about his own health. He told them he had cancer, and he would complain about constant headaches and fatigue. Ellie would later realize how that was yet another form of DeWitt's emotional manipulation and deceit. To pull off the 20 fake personas he'd invented, DeWitt had accumulated a whopping 80 separate devices. When he was arrested, he had 4 phones actually with him, and the remaining phones, iPads, laptops, and more were found in his home and job. They'd all be analyzed to uncover the elaborate web of deceit that he had spun. It wasn't until after DeWitt was arrested and Ellie stopped receiving messages from Jenny and Dr. Bowden that she finally discovered that it was DeWitt who was behind all of them. He had continued the facade with Ellie for months after the murders, including supporting her at her parents' funeral, even as he continued to correspond with her through his false identities. She stated, "I was absolutely beside myself, confused. Who do I trust now?" And then there was the unthinkable. DeWitt had positioned a mobile phone in the Baxter's conservatory, then streamed live footage from that mobile phone to a home security app on his phone. It allowed him to watch the couple helplessly dying in real time. Authorities believe that DeWitt returned to the Baxter home after poisoning them to remove any incrementing evidence like the contaminated glasses containing the fentanyl. As he approached the Baxter home, neighbors observed him looking at his phone, presumably to check on the state of his poisoned victims. On DeWitt's phone, police found photos of the couple slumped in their armchairs. One of the photos was time-stamped April 7th at 5:14 p.m., 2 hours before DeWitt left their home. They would be found in the exact same position as they were in that photo 2 days later. So what could possibly have led such a seemingly nonviolent person to commit such a heinous act against a couple who willingly took him in and treated him like family? Since he had written himself into their will, transferred funds to his control, and even stolen some of Carol's jewelry. On the surface, it appeared that his motivation was financial, but authorities and analysts believed differently. Based on findings, it became clear to law enforcement that DeWitt's satisfaction actually came from the control that he had over Carol's life. He enjoyed watching her declining health and derived pleasure from deciding whether they would live or die. The couple's son, Harry, wrote about how he was saddened as he looked back at videos where his mother was acting strangely, and he could see DeWitt in the background, giggling and smiling, because he knew that he was the one responsible for inflicting her pain. And while authorities could not prove definitively how long DeWitt had been plotting to kill the couple, they speculated that it may have been hastened toward the end. Ellie reported that despite any close relationship the couple had with DeWitt, by the end of 2022, they were irritated by him. She said that he was showing up at their home nearly every day, and they were annoyed by his intrusiveness. She said they had even discussed changing their passwords and parting ways with him, making a clean business break. So DeWitt may have seen the writing on the wall, since it wasn't long after that he executed his deadly plan. As many sentiments as there were for DeWitt and his demeanor, they paled in comparison to the Baxter's described character. About Stephen Baxter, his children wrote, "My dad was a strong man. There are no shortcuts in life," he would always say. He worked every day of his life. He said, "My son just fitted perfectly in his arms like my brother, and I did." He lit up, and he was excited for my new baby, a new baby he never got a chance to meet. And the definition of intelligence, a critical thinker and problem solver, and a person people could absolutely rely on. He sacrificed his life for us to live on. And when the days came where he could finally take time and retire and have time to teach me, a young man, naive and keen at the beginning of his adult life, it was stolen away by someone we all trusted the most. And about Carol Baxter, my mom was the definition of the word love. And my mom was full of life, and she always pushed me to be better. My mom lost her freedom, her will, her ability to function 2 years prior to her murder due to her illness. An illness no one could help with or understand, because it was contrived by Luke DeWitt. Luke DeWitt was charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of possession of a Class A drug, and 1 count of theft. He denied the charges against him. His trial began in February 2024. DeWitt arrived to his trial in a wheelchair, claiming he had a growth on his leg. He denied the prosecution access to his medical records to confirm his injury. They were certain it was fabricated to elicit sympathy for himself during a trial. Ellie herself briefly came under scrutiny again as well, having accepted a loan of £7,000 from DeWitt after her parents' death. The financial exchange invited speculation. At trial, the defense asked her whether she was involved in her parents' death in any way. She replied that she was not. She acknowledged that she and DeWitt were very close, stating, "Luke, I honestly thought was my brother, but unfortunately the evidence is stacking up and it all makes sense now." She confirmed that he had loaned her the money and stated that it did get to a point after my parents died. "I didn't have any money. My partner wasn't able to work after we were all arrested. All I'm guilty of is loving my parents," she told the court. The prosecution outlined DeWitt's months of cruel and systematic torturing, drugging, and manipulating before murdering the couple with a fatal dose of fentanyl. DeWitt's defense was to despicably claim that he was colluding with Stephen Baxter to deceive his wife. He said that he created the fake identities on the instructions of Stephen to give Carol someone to talk to and air all her grievances to. He insisted that Stephen was dictating the scene to deceive Carol, to make her feel that she was receiving help and to convince her to take her medication. But his story fell apart on cross-examination, with evidence pointing squarely and solely at DeWitt. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and on March 20th, after 8 hours into deliberation, the jury unanimously found 34-year-old Lou DeWitt guilty of the murders of Carol and Stephen Baxter. As the verdicts were read, Ellie Baxter wept, and DeWitt remained emotionless in his wheelchair. For the sentencing, the judge weighed whether DeWitt was eligible to receive a whole life order, which is a sentence where the offender would spend the rest of their life in prison without the possibility of parole or early release. In order to impose such a sentence, a crime would need to be considered sadistic. While this crime was cruel and senseless, the judge was not sure that it could properly be described as sadistic. So Lou DeWitt was sentenced to life in prison in order to serve a minimum of 37 years, instead of a whole life order. While it has not been reported which prison DeWitt was sent to, most offenders in his jurisdiction are sent to HM Prison Chelmsford, which is a Category B men's prison and young offenders institution in Chelmsford, Essex, England, built in 1825. The prison is operated by His Majesty's Prison Service. While the prison has a history of poor and unclean conditions, in the past 2 decades it has cleaned up its act. Its current issues revolve around organized gangs, violence, overcrowding, and rampant drug use, with approximately 42% of prisoners failing drug tests. Given that Luke's sentencing was less than a month before the production of this video, nothing noteworthy has been reported in that short period of time. We hope this video did justice to Carol and Stephen Baxter. It's the quiet, unassuming killers that roam among us that are the most terrifying. A detective superintendent from the Kent and Essex Serious Crimes Directorate stated that he considers DeWitt, without doubt, one of the most dangerous men I have ever experienced in my policing career. Given that DeWitt held onto his father's fentanyl packets after he died in 2021, It made authorities wonder how many more murders he planned on carrying out. Case 3. Anna Mariah Wilson was born on May 18, 1996 to parents Eric and Karen Wilson. Mariah, who was fondly known as Mo, grew up in Kirby, a small town in Vermont, along with her brother Matthew. They were a small, loving family that was active and loved the outdoors. As a child, Mariah was both driven and determined. Her mother described her as having a quiet determination, and friends noted her humble, respectful confidence. From the very beginning, Mo was a perfectionist, almost to a fault. Her mother recalled how when she was in 7th grade, the head of school asked her how she was going to deal with her perfectionism. She replied that she was going to start with a clean plate. Her mother laughed, knowing her daughter meant a clean slate. But plate was so much cuter. Mo grew up near Vermont's Kingdom Trails, a mecca of trails for skiers and mountain bikers. And coming from a family of athletes, sports had a strong influence in her household. Her father, Eric, raced on the U.S. ski team, her mother, Karen, as a cycling instructor, and her aunt, Laura Wilson Todd, was a 2-time Olympic cross-country ski racer. And that was the sport that Mo gravitated toward as well. Mo attended Burke Mountain Academy, a private college prep high school in Vermont specializing in training alpine ski racers. By her sophomore year, she was ranked 3rd in the nation in giant slalom for her age group. That was the same year she tore her ACL. She recovered, and after graduating in 2014, she attended Dartmouth College and fulfilled her childhood dream of joining the Dartmouth Alpine ski team. She then promptly tore her ACL again. Believing embracing adversity, she set out to tackle her injury head-on. She began cycling to rehabilitate her ACL and soon discovered a new passion. She wanted to become a professional cyclist. She graduated with a degree in engineering in 2019, and while she joined the corporate world working at the bike designer and manufacturer Specialized, her off time was spent skyrocketing to the top of the professional cycling world. While Mo had done mountain biking when she was a young child, she had never done gravel cycling, which involves riding on unpaved roads of open gravel, dirt tracks, and other compositions. But within 3 years of mountain and gravel bike racing, she had become the winningest professional off-road cyclist in America, known in part for her vicious climbs. Mo went from having never competed at the national level to winning, or coming in second in nearly every highly competitive race she entered, unheard of for someone so new to the sport. Her trainer noted how out of the gate her numbers clocked in at World Cup levels. So in 2022, after over 2 years of COVID pandemic repercussions that allowed her more time to train, Mo took the leap, moved to San Francisco, and quit her full-time job so she could dedicate herself to professional racing. By everyone's account, Mo was poised to become the top bike racer in the country, possibly the world. But to be successful as a professional racer, you have to do more than just win. You need sponsors. Enter professional cyclist Colin Strickland. Colin was popular and well established in the cycling community, having competed both nationally and internationally, and having raced about 10 years by that point. Born November 7, 1986, Colin Strickland grew up in Johnson City, Texas, on an organic farm. Mo met Colin Strickland in September of 2021 at a bike race in Idaho. With Colin having landed, sought-after sponsors like Red Bull, Allied Cycle Works, Raffi, and more, the two connected, with Colin advising her on the ropes of landing sponsorships. At the time they met, Colin was dating a woman named Caitlin Marie Armstrong. Born on November 21, 1987, Caitlin grew up in Livonia, Michigan, where she was known to be friendly, outgoing, and athletic. In high school, she was voted best hair for her class of 2005. After attending a community college, she went on to attend Eastern Michigan University. And after that, she entered the workforce in finance, then switched to being a real estate agent while also teaching yoga on the side as a certified yoga instructor. Caitlin and Colin had met on a dating app in 2019. They began an on-again, off-again relationship that would span 3 years. Caitlin started getting into cycling like Colin. She became addicted to it and began racing on an amateur level. While they had their ups and downs, the couple continued seeing each other. Then, after the historic 2021 winter freeze in Texas resulted in Caitlin's apartment being flooded, the couple moved in together. They also started a business together, restoring old trailers called Wheelhouse Mobile. One of the off-again periods of their relationship happened in October of that year, a month after Colin met Mo. The couple had gotten into it over Colin going on a mountain bike ride with Mo and some other female pro cyclists, and not inviting Caitlin. While Caitlin and Colin were broken up, he and Mo had a brief romantic relationship. Caitlin was also seeing other men at the time as well. Shortly after that, Colin and Caitlin decided to get back together, reverting his relationship with Mo back to a friendship and professional relationship, according to Colin. Less than a year later, on May 10, 2022, 1 week shy of her 26th birthday, Mo traveled to Austin, Texas ahead of a race that was to take place in nearby Hico, Texas, the gravel loca bike race. Mo was favored to win the race. She was staying at the apartment of her friend, Caitlin Cash. Once she was settled in, Mo contacted her friend Colin to see if he wanted to hang out. She texted him, "Do you have plans tonight?" He replied, "Want to go swimming? Maybe swimming in a beverage?" It was a plan. The two met up a few hours later. They went swimming at a local swimming pool, then headed to a place called Pool Burger for a bite. Then Colin dropped Mo back off at her friend's apartment and headed back home. But tragically, that would be the last time he would see Mo alive. That was at just after 8:30 p.m. Caitlin Cash, the friend Mo was staying with, had been out herself that evening and arrived home about 10 p.m. to the unthinkable. She found her friend lifeless on the bathroom floor. She immediately called 911 as she began CPR. But her friend had been dead over 45 minutes by that point. Police arrived, and the news of the killing began making headlines before police divulged any identities. Police are investigating a suspicious death in East Austin. This happened on Maple Avenue, near East 17th Street. Overnight, a woman called police saying she found her friend inside her house unresponsive, and there was blood near her. When officers arrived, they found the victim had gunshot wounds. EMS provided life-saving measures, but the woman later died from her injuries. Police do not know how long she was inside the home, but did call her death suspicious. It is unclear if a gun was found on scene. Cash shared that the only thing she noticed missing from the apartment was Mo's racing bike. Police would later find it discarded in a bamboo patch near the apartment. Nearby surveillance footage captured a black Jeep SUV with a bike rack on the back leaving the area that evening. Once police learned that Mo was dropped off a few hours earlier by Colin Strickland, they wanted to pay him a visit. Upon arrival at his home the next morning, in his driveway they noticed a black Jeep SUV with a bike rack on the back. They called him into the station, and he readily agreed. Once there, he was cooperative and transparent. He shared the history of he and Mo's 1 to 2 week romantic relationship the prior year. Throughout the interview, he spoke highly of Mo Wilson and her accomplishments, referring to her as the best female cyclist in the U.S. and possibly the world. In contrast, when he referred to Caitlin Armstrong, he described her as a participant at bike races while he was a racer. He reported that he asked her not to ride with him because she holds him back. He also shared how Caitlin was an extremely jealous person to the point of calling Mo multiple times, telling her that Colin was her boyfriend, not Mo's, and to stay away from him. He said her jealousy was the source of countless arguments. He shared that after he and Caitlin got back together, he continued to keep in touch with Mo professionally, but had to delete any text messages they sent, and save Mo's number under a fake name to avoid conflict since Caitlin had blocked Mo and other women's numbers from his phone in the past. He also acknowledged that he did not disclose to Caitlin that he was out with Mo the night of the murder, and even lied to her, telling her he was elsewhere. He told them that the Jeep in the driveway belonged to Caitlin, but that she was not aware of where Mo Wilson was staying. And he told police that he had bought handguns for both he and Caitlin after Caitlin had expressed concern for her personal safety while cycling alone. So now, they want to have a talk with Caitlin Armstrong. And as luck would have it, police discover that there's an outstanding arrest warrant for Caitlin Botak's treatment without paying. After her procedure, she had left her maxed-out credit card with an employee, saying she would get another card from her car, but she never returned. Police brought her in on that warrant. Caitlin Armstrong was not cooperative during the interview. Typically, innocent people are eager to share their lack of involvement and clear their names, but not Armstrong. It raised law enforcement's suspicions even further. When detectives told her that her vehicle being in the area of the murder did not look good for her, she simply nodded her head in agreement, but offered no explanation as to why her vehicle would be there. And when detectives told Armstrong that Colin and Mo had gone out together on the day of the murder, she told them, "I didn't have any idea that he saw or even went out with this girl as of recently." They suspected her involvement, but they wouldn't be able to hold her long. They were told that Armstrong's date of birth turned out to be wrong on the arrest warrant, rendering it invalid. So, without enough cause to charge her with anything else, they had to let her go. Then, within 3 days of the murder, police received calls from two of Armstrong's friends, both of whom said they had a conversation with Armstrong, where she was extremely angry over what she felt was a romantic relationship between Mo and Colin. One of them stated that Armstrong was to the point of shaking with anger. Both recalled her saying that she wanted to kill Mo. One of the friends recalled Armstrong saying that she had either just purchased a gun or was going to. Neither took the threat seriously, attributing it to Armstrong's extreme emotional state at the time. Despite Colin's claim that he and Mo were only involved romantically during his breakup with Caitlin, evidence and statements start pointing toward more of an on-again, off-again relationship, at least around January of 2022. That is the time frame when Armstrong had the rage conversations with her friends about Colin seeing Mo. It's when she requested a gun from Strickland, and it's when Mo sent the following text to Strickland, which included, "This weekend was strange for me, and I just want to know what's going on. If you just want to be friends seems to be the case, then that's cool, but I'd like to talk about it." The next day Colin replied, "Caitlin came along to go to a meeting about the Sprinter Spartan Hotel project." In hindsight, this was not a good idea. It appeared to law enforcement that even if Strickland saw their relationship as platonic at that time, Mo did not. What was unarguable was that Strickland's name was associated with the crime. He acknowledges much by posting a statement on social media expressing, "There is no way to adequately express the regret and torture I feel about my proximity to this horrible crime." That proximity acknowledgement triggered several of his sponsors to promptly drop him. Based on all the findings and evidence accumulated over the next few days, as well as later court testimonies, law enforcement was able to establish a clear picture of how the evening transpired. After Mo and Colin went swimming to cool off on the 80-degree day, they stopped to eat at Pool Burger, where they were seen on the restaurant's surveillance camera. Their neutral interactions appeared to reflect the strictly platonic relationship they were having at the time, just as both Mo's family and Strickland maintain. After eating, Strickland drove Mo on his motorcycle to her friend's home. He dropped her off at 8:35 p.m., then left for home. 1 minute later, he pulls over and sends a text to Armstrong. "Hey, are you out? I went to drop some flowers for Allison at her son's house up north, and my phone died. Heading home unless you have another food suggestion." Then, a minute after that, a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera captures Armstrong's black Jeep SUV pulling up to and stopping at the home where Mo was staying. Shortly after that, the Ring camera shows the Jeep leaving. Turns out Armstrong actually did know where Mo was staying. She was using a fitness app called Strava, which cyclists use to track their bike ride data. It allowed Armstrong to track exactly where Mo was staying. Armstrong also had access to Strickland's Apple laptop login and password, and police documents speculate that she may have been reading his messages and knew exactly what the pair was up to. Evidence showed that Armstrong was actually following the pair for at least part of their outing. After Strickland dropped Mo off, Armstrong made her way into the home. She then shot Wilson twice in the head, and then a few moments later, stood over her and shot her again in the heart. One of the bullets also pierced her hand, which the medical examiner determined was likely the result of Mo putting her hands up to try to shield herself. Within minutes of dropping Mo off, Strickland was seen on his motorcycle some 8 miles away, logistically clearing him from any involvement in the shooting. He had arrived home shortly after 9:21 p.m., and Armstrong was not there. When she arrived home later that evening, she was neither frazzled nor acting strange. She did, however, aggressively initiate intimacy with him, exhibiting unusually forceful behavior that he didn't mind at the time, but in hindsight, says he feels traumatized by. The next morning, when detectives visited Strickland and he learned Mo was murdered, he was shocked. When he next saw Armstrong, he told her that he had been out with Mo, but uncharacteristically, she was not upset. He asked her if her car was near the scene of the murder, like detectives had described, and she told him she was at a waxing appointment, a yoga class, and a healer. He said she vanished a couple of days later. Testing of the bike that was discarded near the home revealed DNA on its handlebars that highly likely matched Armstrong's. Law enforcement speculated that Armstrong either threw it there to make it look like a robbery, or she considered the bike a symbolic representation of Mo's livelihood or something dear to her, and she wanted to take that away from her. Law enforcement also discovered that on the night of the murder, Armstrong's phone was not connected to any cell network, indicating it was likely either off or in airplane mode. Police were confident it was intentional, noting that in this day and age, if your phone is either off or not connected to a network, you are likely either the victim of a crime or committing one. A silent phone actually speaks volumes. And ballistic testing revealed that the gun Strickland purchased for Armstrong had a strong likelihood of being the murder weapon. Armed with the evidence they gathered up until that point, on May 17th, 6 days after the shooting and 5 days after Armstrong walked out of the interrogation, a warrant for her arrest was issued for the first-degree murder of Anna Maria Wilson. But they were too late. Caitlin Armstrong had fled and was nowhere to be found. The day after her interrogation, Armstrong made plans. She sold her black Jeep to CarMax for $12,000, lending her a nice pot of cash, and that appeared to just be a supplement. According to Colin, prior to the murder, he had given Armstrong $450,000 to place into an investment account, which she had sole access to. Plenty to fund her dubious plans. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshal Lone Star Fugitive Task Force was put into action to track down and apprehend the fleeing Armstrong. They had come to learn that the warrant they thought was invalid due to the erroneous date of birth was actually valid, and they could have indeed held Armstrong in custody on that warrant. They'd find out that she may have fled to her sister's home in New York. They tracked down her sister, Christine Armstrong, and pay her a visit. Christine shares that Caitlin had indeed been there, but was gone. The day after Armstrong sold her car, she boarded a plane from Austin to New York, headed for her sister's. She stayed a few days. Then Christine dropped her off at the Newark, New Jersey airport to board a plane back home to Austin. But later, Caitlin called Christine and told her that she decided to drive the 1,700 miles, or 2,700 kilometers back home instead of flying. Christine had not heard from her since. Authorities don't buy the driving back to Austin story. They checked for any outbound reservations for Caitlin Armstrong, but came up empty. But recalling that her sister said her passport was missing, they asked Homeland Security to check for any travelers traveling under the name Christine Armstrong. They got a match. A Christine Armstrong boarded a one-way flight to Costa Rica. Caitlin Armstrong had used her sister's passport to flee to Costa Rica. Armstrong arrived in Costa Rica with a head start evading authorities. They were tracking her down remotely based on intel, but would not arrive to the country for a month. By then, in addition to Armstrong's original murder charge, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution was added, and the for her capture was placed at $21,000. Intelligence revealed that Armstrong was staying in hostels in Costa Rica, which didn't narrow the scope very much since there are an overwhelming number of hostels in the country. They then received a tip that Armstrong had connected with an American businessman there, so they called him. He originally hung up on them thinking they were either telemarketers or scammers. But after the third attempt, they were able to identify themselves as U.S. Marshals and explain that they were looking for a fugitive named Caitlin Armstrong. They sent him a picture of her while they stayed on the line. He confirmed that that was the person he met at a yoga studio in Joko, but that it didn't look exactly like her and that she was going by the name of Beth. He told them they could find her at a particular yoga studio in Joko. Detectives arrived in Costa Rica hopeful. They canvassed the Joko area and sifted through hours of surveillance video, but they came up empty. Then they got one more lead. It was in a small village on the Pacific coast called Santa Teresa. The town was tiny and full of American tourists, many of whom to the detectives' dismay resembled Caitlin Armstrong. When detectives arrived, they immediately spotted several women who looked like they could possibly be her. It was going to be tougher than they thought. Detectives made numerous acquaintances and had people contacting them for any sightings. They encountered a local restaurant owner who hailed from New York. He knew Armstrong, but said she went by Ari, one of the numerous aliases they discovered. She had told him that she was trying to establish herself there as a yoga teacher. The restaurant owner had noticed a bandage on her face, which she told him she got from being hit by a surfboard, a reasonable cause, but they still couldn't track down Armstrong. So detectives got clever. They placed several ads, posing as a hostel looking for a yoga instructor. It seemed promising, but after a week of no responses, it was time to throw in the towel. They left the small town and returned to San Jose, preparing to head back to the States. But before they could actually head out, they got a hit on the ad. A yoga instructor who was working at a hostel in Santa Teresa said she was interested. So they rushed back to the small town and to the hostel where the yoga instructor was said to be staying. They sent in a single detective to avoid scaring her off and to get a good look at her to confirm her identity. He pretended to be a tourist, and to throw her off, he only spoke to her in Spanish. That required her to pull up Google Translate on her phone. So each time she would be reading her phone, the detective would take the opportunity to get better look at her. She had a bandage on her nose, and her lips looked bigger, but her eyes were identical. It was her. On June 29th, 43 days after Caitlin Armstrong led authorities on a manhunt, she was arrested. She would be extradited and returned to jail in Texas, where, clearly a flight risk, she would be held on a $3.5 million bond. Turns out those bandages, the swollen lips, the hard time they were having finding her, was because she had started getting plastic surgery as soon as she arrived in Costa Rica. In addition to having cut and dyed her hair brown, Armstrong spent over $6,000 on cosmetic surgery. In a locker at the hostel she was staying at, along with her sister's passport, they found a receipt for both a nose job significantly altering the appearance of her nose and a brow lift. Knowing she was a wanted woman, Armstrong tried to avoid taking the mandatory before and after photos, but the doctor performing the surgery insisted. Those photos would later be used in court, along with their conversations about her reluctance. 34-year-old Armstrong had used several fake names and stayed at various hostels to evade capture. She also began dating a man named Teal Ackerson. They went on a handful of dates, with Teal noting that Armstrong typically preferred to go to secluded places, which made sense to him once the truth was revealed. After he found out who she really was, he said that he had not recognized her from the photos put out by U.S. Marshals because she looked that different. While the spotlight was on the brazen fugitive who so callously murdered, then set out to protect her freedom in the most extreme manner possible, the focus deserved to be on the unique rising star whose life impacted so many around her. The cycling community and Mariah's friends and family mourned the tremendous loss of the woman who used whatever position she had to make a difference in whatever way she could. She wanted to do more than just win races. Trying to figure out, how can I make this more than just about that? How can I inspire people? How can I give back to the cycling community? How can I bring more people into the sport? How can I make it more inclusive? Whatever it may be, all that stuff is really important to me, I think, and I want to find meaning and purpose in cycling that goes far beyond the results. Her community mourned their unspeakable loss. The potential, the kindness, the person. On October 11, 2023, over a year after she was arrested and a few weeks before she was set to stand trial, Caitlin Armstrong escaped. She started by spending months vigorously training in her cell and throughout the facility, much of which was captured on jail video footage. Then, she executed her meticulously planned escape by faking a leg injury that would get her from her jail cell to an outside doctor's office in town. Authorities believe she chose to fake a leg injury so that she wouldn't have to wear leg restraints. Once the appointment was over and they were walking out to the transport vehicle, she managed to bolt away from the two officers who were escorting her. She ran more than a block and tried to scale a 6-foot wall, but failed. Officers were able to yank her back to the ground after her striped uniform pants slipped off while scaling the wall, revealing thermal pants underneath which she wore, planning to blend into a crowd once she escaped. The officers both sustained minor injuries to their arms and knees, resulting in a new felony charge of escape-causing bodily injury. The charge would be dismissed a few days later. Caitlin Armstrong's trial began on November 1st, 2023. Prosecutors laid out a graphic timeline of events that led up to the deadly shooting, starting with Armstrong logging into Strickland's email and Instagram accounts, all the way up to her standing over Emma Wilson as she ended her life. They outlined her time on the run, including presenting the receipt for her plastic surgery, along with evidence of Google searches like, and whether her phone could be tracked if she didn't make phone calls. All were consistent with her trying to evade capture, but defense argued that they had no direct evidence linking Armstrong to the murders. No one saw her committing the murder. Surveillance footage never showed her entering or leaving, and they argued that the ballistic evidence was not definitive. They claimed their client was trapped in a nightmare of circumstantial evidence, and that law enforcement had a theory of what happened and sought out the evidence to fit it. They argued that the reason she fled and tried to disguise her identity was that she was scared of her boyfriend. It was split. Colin Strickland was called to testify and was less than accommodating. At a time when it was time to fight for justice for M.O., he was typically uncooperative and aloof on the stand, even described as arrogant. Most reports speculate due to his cycling career being over. Apparently frustrated, there were even instances where he was rude and aggressive to media, first shoving a cameraman's camera, almost making him drop it, then later going out of his way to step on the cameraman's foot, which didn't imply any guilt, but did not present well for Strickland, personally or professionally. After a 2-week trial and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found 35-year-old Caitlin Armstrong guilty. The same jury would convene to determine Armstrong's sentence. She had previously rejected a plea deal that would have reportedly shaved decades off of a potential life sentence if she would receive one, potentially allowing her to leave prison in her 50s or 60s. Prosecutors urged the jury to sentence Armstrong to at least 40 years in prison. The jury returned the next day, handing down a sentence of a whopping 90 years in prison, well beyond the time recommended by the prosecutors. She was also fined $10,000. She would be eligible for parole after serving at least 30 of those years in the year 2052. Her current release date is scheduled for July of 2112, when she would be 124 years old. Caitlin Armstrong is currently serving out her sentence at Dr. Lane Murray Unit, a women's prison located in Gatesville, Texas. At the making of this video, it has been 6 months since she was sentenced and little is known about her experience there. It is known that Murray is one of the many prisons in Texas, and its unbearably hot summers that does not have air conditioning. So there's that. A month after Armstrong was sentenced, her new attorney filed a motion for a new trial claiming that her previous attorneys did not present enough character witnesses to demonstrate Armstrong's traumatic childhood. The motion also claimed that she was pregnant about the time she was arrested. Her new attorney claimed that had more witnesses testified about Armstrong's traumatic life, and had they known she was pregnant around the time she was arrested, her punishment might have been less severe. The court filing did not state who she was pregnant by, what happened to the pregnancy, or any evidence supporting it. Many speculated that it was yet another attempt by the convicted murderess to avoid facing the consequences of her selfish, brutal act. Colin Strickland has essentially vanished from the public eye. After extensive research, we couldn't find any evidence of whether he continues to race or not. But regardless, any public information about him during the 6 months that have passed since he is non-existent. A few months after Mo's death, at Keens Trails in East Burke, where Mariah spent so much time biking and skiing, a trail was built in her honor, called Mariah's Ascent. The trail was a collaborative effort from numerous diverse groups of volunteers who donated hundreds of hours to honor Mo. Also to honor Mariah's memory, the Wilson family created the Mariah Wilson Foundation. They said in her journal, she wrote that her mission was to inspire to ride bikes and be active, whatever that may look like. We want to do what Mariah didn't have the chance to do. What she had said about cycling, we now say about sustaining her legacy and impact in our community. We can't not do this. We hope this video did justice to Mariah Wilson. Mo's spirit and outlook were bigger than life. She used the power of what she had at her disposal, what some might consider a limited platform, and used any advances she fought to achieve to reach out to and bring in others in a meaningful way. Case 4. Michelle Lonzinski was born and raised in New Jersey along with her older brother and sister and a younger brother. It was when Michelle was 16 and visiting her older brother in the nearby city of Walker, New Jersey, that Michelle met and began dating George Wiltsey. A year later, on August 6, 1985, when Michelle was 17, the pair welcomed a son, Timothy, who the family lovingly called Timmy. The relationship quickly crumbled, however, and 6 months after having Timmy, Michelle and the baby left and moved in with her sister in South Amboy, New Jersey. Having dropped out of high school, Michelle would take on various low-paying jobs, sometimes 2 at a time, and eventually move out of her sister's home and into her own apartment. Juggling work, her social life, and her son, Michelle struggled, relying on family and friends to help her watch young Timmy, and facing disappointment from 2 serious relationships who ultimately decided they were not ready to become stepfathers. At the beginning of 1990, when Michelle's sister and brother-in-law, who were her primary source of child care help, moved to Florida, it became even more difficult for Michelle. She was late for work often and bring Timmy with her sometimes, and once Timmy began school himself, he was also tardy or absent frequently, with the school reporting 63 tardies and 25 absences in his first year. But despite the challenges Michelle faced, she was widely regarded as a loving, caring mother who was devoted to her young son, making sure he had everything he needed, saving up enough money to send him to St. Mary's private school for his kindergarten year, and taking him on vacations and special outings whenever she could. It was on one of those outings that the sinister basis of this story began to take shape. It was Friday, May 25, 1991, the start of the Memorial Day weekend. 23-year-old Michelle Lonzinski, had made plans to take 5-year-old Timmy to the local carnival that was in town in nearby Sayville. The plan for the day was to take Timmy shopping to pick out clothes that would go with the kindergarten graduation gown Michelle had just purchased for him the week prior. Michelle planned to complete the shopping in the morning, then take both Timmy and her infant niece to the carnival in the evening. When evening came around, however, Michelle headed to the carnival without the infant niece and without calling the infant's mother. She arrived at the carnival at about 7 p.m. that evening. Sometime around 7:30 p.m., Michelle ran into her 13-year-old niece, Jennifer Blair, along with Jennifer's friend. Michelle was looking around frantically and told the girls that she'd lost sight of Timmy when she went to concessions to buy a soda. The three soon reported that the boy was missing to the Sayville police officer on site at the carnival. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, the officer called for backup. Additional officers arrived and joined in the search for the missing boy. The carnival was shut down, and despite exhaustive search efforts by the large volume of police officers, firefighters, trained dogs, and numerous volunteers that joined in, there was no sign of Timmy at the carnival or in the surrounding area. The search continued until 2 a.m., when it was finally called off for the night. The search for Timmy resumed the next morning at 5:30 a.m., with over 300 people searching the park and surrounding neighborhoods. Helicopters and diving units were deployed, leaving no stone unturned. By noon, the Sayville Police Department was convinced that given their exhaustive search, the boy was not in the park and there was nothing further they could do. So they called off the search. Police had already searched Michelle's car the day of the disappearance in search of any clues, but found nothing. They searched it again this second day, along with her home, still finding nothing. 4,000 flyers were circulated throughout the community, and police continued to follow up on leads called into the station. Timmy's father, George Wiltsikitz, ruled out as a suspect since he was at home in Iowa at the time. Police interviewed carnival workers and visitors from that day to see if anyone recalled seeing the boy. 2 witnesses, as well as a group of teenage boys, were confident they saw someone who matched the description of Timmy before the time of the disappearance. One witness said she saw and even had a conversation with Michelle prior to the disappearance, and there was no one with her. Police searched Michelle's apartment, but like with her car, found nothing helpful. They also placed a tap on her phone to record the phone numbers of all incoming calls. They interviewed her former boyfriends, Timmy's father, and anyone of interest. Timmy's face appeared on milk cartons displaying missing children, and he was even featured on America's Most Wanted twice, including just days after his disappearance. Police are initially baffled by this child disappearing among such a large crowd of people undetected, but once they begin interviewing Michelle, they begin to form suspicions. Michelle originally reported to police that at about 7:15 p.m., she left Timmy by the side of a trailer while she went to buy a soda from concessions. Then when she turned around, he was gone. She also gave police an account of their activities prior to going to the carnival, which included playing kickball and visiting the petting zoo at Homedale Park that afternoon. However, according to the Homedale Park police, the lot where she said they parked was closed that day. Police interviewed friends and neighbors, and couldn't find anyone who had seen her son that night. The last time anyone who knew him had seen Timmy was around 11 a.m., on the morning that he disappeared. When police interviewed Michelle about a week after the disappearance on June 4th, she reiterated her account that she lost sight of Timmy when she went to purchase a soda, and that she had no idea where he was. But when they interviewed her again just 2 days later on June 6th, while she began by stating she didn't know where Timmy was, after a few hours she changed her story. She reported that she saw an older man take Timmy off of a ride and walk into a younger man. She said she yelled out, but the older man told her to stay away or the boy is going to get injured. The detectives pressed further and she said, "You wanted to hear something, so I told you." She returned later that day and said she made up the story. That would be just the beginning of a bizarre string of stories. With her changing story, police focused in on Michelle. They called her back in the very next day for further interrogation with the same detectives, and she didn't disappoint. This time her account changed even more dramatically. She told detectives that while Timmy was on a ride at the carnival, she was approached by a woman whom she knew by the name of Ellen. She said she knew Ellen because Ellen used to cash welfare checks at the bank where Michelle had worked as a teller a few years back. She claimed that she was also a go-go dancer at a local club. She said Ellen was accompanied by 2 men and a young girl and offered to watch Timmy while Michelle purchased a soda. When Michelle returned, however, Timmy was gone, as were Ellen, the two men, and the young girl. Michelle explained to detectives that she had withheld this information about Ellen out of concern for Timmy's safety. Given Michelle's ever-evolving story, police decided to enlist the help of her boyfriend, Fred Bruno. They had him secretly record her in an attempt to get her to share what truly happened, but they came up empty. Michelle told him the Ellen story of the moment, that she was currently telling police. So a week after their last interview with her,